Are you a millennial or Gen Z and wondering how the heck am I ever going to buy a house? Well, today my younger sister sits down with my dad, the financial dad, and asks him all her burning financial questions. Today, it's all about mortgages.
Okay, at the end of the day, you have to have some kind of a down payment. Historically, you needed about an 80% mortgage and a 20%
I
down
thought you were going to
payment.
say an
No,
80%
no, no,
down payment. I was
20% down
like,
payment.
that's a lot.
So only 20%. Now today, you can get as little as a 5% down payment. You can get a
Oh, wow.
mortgage with that. And you have to have something called private mortgage insurance or PMI. That protects the bank that gives the mortgage against that 15% that they're risking by giving you a 5% mortgage versus a
Okay.
20%, by giving you a 95% mortgage versus an 80% mortgage. So if you can save 5%, or get a 5% down payment together, you can get a house. There is also a program for taking money out of 401k plans without penalty to buy a first home. If you've put money into the 401k, now you got to pay taxes on it, but you don't pay a 10% penalty, which is usually how that works. So most folks, your age are probably going to end up trying to finance in that way.
With a lower down payment, because then
Lower
you don't
down
have to
payment.
have the cash up
Correct.
front. Now, I want to ask though, does that mean that your mortgage is going to be 95% of the cost of the house?
It does.
So you're going to have a higher monthly
Higher
payment.
monthly payment, that's harder to qualify for. So, you may need roughly 28% of your income is what banks look at for your mortgage payment.
So that's the monthly. Okay.
Yep,
the
of your
payment.
monthly income. So the monthly payment should be something like 28% or less, actually with your property taxes and everything.
All told.
All of that should be less than 28% of your income in order for the bank to say yes.
Okay.
And to go forward with it. But that's the way that you can likely do it. And frankly, I have bought a house that you're sitting in it, as a matter of fact. So, if you're trying to get there with the lowest down payment, that's really the way to go.
Okay. Yeah, because I do want to talk a little bit about, I know within my friends, the conversation is kind of, it feels right now like, oh, that's impossible. Like it
Right.
feels impossible to buy a house. Now, given I live in Los Angeles, so the housing market's a little different there than other parts of the country.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm just wondering what you have to say, maybe anything encouraging towards people who are feeling like that's a really far away non-possibility.
Well, honestly, the first thing I would say is talk to a professional, talk to an accountant, talk to a financial planner, because they can lay this out for you as to how it could be done. And that's what we do for people. So I would speak to a professional and just see what can be done, how it would work. It's really it's a challenging calculation because the price of housing is rising as you're saving. So you're hitting a moving target, sort of, right?
Yeah, so ideally, like your savings is increasing, but also the housing market is getting more expensive.
The
So
amount
it's
of
just kind
down
of
payment needed
going
is
like
growing.
this instead of like meeting in the middle.
So eventually,
Yeah.
you got to be planning for a number that's a little higher if you're planning for multiple years in the future for that
Yeah.
down payment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's doable. It's just painful, but it's always painful to get that first house.
Yeah. Well, I'm also curious what you think, because I know also generational expectations kind of change with each generation and
Yep.
like the kind of like milestones and what age you should be when you reach them. Like I feel like growing up, I remember thinking you want to have a house by age 30. And I think in some parts of the country that still may be reasonable. But it's interesting living in a big city where people kind of live their lives a little slower because they're more career oriented or more community oriented or what have you. So I'm curious, like, if you have any thoughts around that, because I feel like I'm having to shift, like, maybe you don't need to have a house by a certain age.
Well, you don't. I mean, you just don't. You'd like to, but
Yeah.
you don't have to.
Yeah.
A house is the kind of thing that usually people wait until they're married for also, because you could buy a house, find someone you want to marry, and they hate the house, So it's sort of like it may or may not be a good idea to buy a house if you are 28, 29, trying to get one by 30, an emotional reason, rather than thinking of it in terms of a
This
life
is where you're going to
plan.
grow into.
Yeah. I'm going to have a partner, I hope, at some point. So When I have that partner, it might make more sense, besides the fact that you're now joining finances and it's easier
will
to get
help.
there.
Yes.
That certainly helps. But no, I mean, people shouldn't think in terms of, first of all, you should never compare yourself to someone else or to some, objective standard that is imposed from the outside. We are all individuals. We are all, everything is not right for everybody. Not every way of doing things is right for everybody. So what is right for this person may not be right for this person. And the lower the income, the harder it is. You have to think in terms of maybe moving farther away from where you'd like to be because the prices are a little lower. So there are ways to do it. But again, I'll just go back to speaking to a professional about it.
This actually made me feel a little less stressed about it. I
Good.
hope that I think for me, buying a house is going to be further out in the future. I might be 35 or 40, and maybe that's fine. Maybe you're never going to end up purchasing a house, and also maybe that's okay.
Everybody's life is different. Everybody's needs are different. Some people connect to a house, to the notion of ownership. Some people don't. Some people, you can live in New York City and rent your entire life. And as long as you're still saving money towards, the thing is at retirement, you hope to have your house paid off, let's say, by retirement, right?
Yeah.
So if you are still renting into retirement, well, then you still have that cash flow item that you have to plan for in your retirement. But that's just another number you plan for. And so you have to save towards that. The downside of renting is that you don't get an income tax deduction for mortgage interest. You don't get an income tax deduction for property taxes. And the owner gets those deductions, you don't get them. Rent is not deductible. Maybe one day it will be. That would actually really kind of, that would be a great way to help younger people get there. It's not, there's not some magic formula or some requirement that people be at a certain place by a certain time. And it's not healthy to impose things upon ourselves mentally, like I have to be retired by 50, or I have to have a house by 35 or 30, or, those just bring stress. They're not real. They're self-imposed. And they keep you from enjoying life.
And that's maybe why we're here.
We're supposed to enjoy life.
Yeah.
So money should not, ideally, money, your connection to money is not something that causes you stress all the time. The purpose of the money is to help you live your life happily.
Yeah.
Let's think of it that way.
And there you have it. Now you know a little bit more about mortgages and how to actually afford something when you're millennial and Gen Z. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with a friend. See you later.